March 15, 1623. Dawn hasn't broken over Istanbul yet. The sky is that particular shade of black that makes even torches seem like they're drowning. Inside Topkapi Palace, behind doors carved from Lebanese cedar and reinforced with iron bands forged in Damascus, someone is screaming. Not the scream of childbirth, not the scream of mourning. This is the sound of a mind breaking in real time. The guards outside, men who've stood over dying soldiers, who've witnessed executions, who've heard every variety of human suffering. These guards take 3 steps backward from the door. 3 steps. One will later write in his personal journal, recovered centuries later from a family estate in Anatolia. I have heard men die on the battlefield. I have never heard anything like what I heard that night. It was the sound of a soul trying to escape a body that had become a prison. The girl screaming is 15 years old. Her name is Fatma Sultan, daughter of the most powerful man in the known world, granddaughter of the woman who would rule an empire from behind latest windows. 3 months ago, she was writing treatises on astronomy. Tonight, she's learning what it means to be currency in her father's empire. This isn't a story about a wedding night. This is a story about a machine. One designed with surgical precision to turn human beings into instruments of state policy. And the method trauma so systematic, so calculated that it makes modern psychological warfare look primitive by comparison. What you're about to hear has been buried in encrypted archives for 600 years. The question isn't why they hid it. The question is how many other truths are still buried. Before we continue, look, I know you're here for the story. But here's the thing. Every view, every like, every subscription to Crimson Historians isn't just algorithm food. It's a vote. A vote that says, yes, show me the history that makes me uncomfortable. Show me the truths that don't fit in textbooks. Now, back to Istanbul. Back to the night that changed everything. The Ottoman Empire isn't just powerful. It's the center of gravity for 3 continents. When Istanbul speaks, Venice listens. When the Sultan frowns, kings in Vienna lose sleep. And inside this empire, inside the marble heart of Topkapi Palace, there's a section called the Imperial Harem. You've heard of it. You think you know what it was. You don't. This was a parallel government, a shadow state where the Sultan's mother, his wives, his daughters, and hundreds of enslaved women lived in a hierarchy more complex than any European court. Some of these women wielded more real power than most male ministers. But here's the catch. Power had rules. And for the Sultan's daughters, those rules were written in their own flesh. Fatma Sultan was born in 166 to Sultan Ahmed I, and Kozum Sultan, a woman who had become one of the most powerful rulers in Ottoman history, though no history book calls her that. Kozum ruled from the shadows for nearly 40 years. She made sultans. She unmade them, too. But even Kusum couldn't protect her daughter from the machine. By age 10, Fatma spoke 4 languages fluently. She could debate scholars in Persian, write poetry in Arabic that made court poets nervous, discuss Greek philosophy in the original text. Palace astronomers recorded that she asked questions about planetary motion that wouldn't be formally answered until Kepler's work reached the Ottoman court years later. She kept journals, dozens of them, filled with observations about lunar phases, sketches of architectural innovations, philosophical questions about the nature of time. One entry dated December 1620. If the stars move in perfect circles, why does time feel like a spiral? Father says I think too much for a girl. Mother says nothing, but her eyes tell me she knows something I don't. I wish the stars could warn me of what's coming. They couldn't. December 1622. Fatma is summoned to the innermost chamber of the Harem. No warning, no explanation. Her mother is there. Kusum Sultan, the woman who'd orchestrated political coups, who'd survived assassination attempts, who'd outlived enemies with the patience of stone slowly wearing down water, sits with her back perfectly straight, face unreadable. The announcement is made by Gulnar Hatun, a woman whose job title doesn't translate cleanly into English. She was an architect of psychological destruction, and she'd been doing it for 30 years. The decision has been made, W. Gulnar said in a voice that carried no emotion whatsoever. You will marry Ka Mustafa Pasha. The wedding will be March 15th. Preparations begin tomorrow. Karam Mustafa Pasha, a military commander, 20 years, Fatma's senior, a man whose face carried scars from 3 different campaigns. A man who'd built his reputation on efficiency, on breaking things quickly and completely. For him, this marriage was a promotion, a reward for loyalty. For Fatma, it was a death sentence with a wedding dress. Fatma doesn't speak. She looks at her mother. Kozum's face remains stone. That silence is its own answer. What happened next wasn't just preparation for marriage. It was a rasher by design. You know what the worst part about this story is? It's not that it happened. It's that we almost lost it completely. Multiple someones worked very hard to make sure you never heard about what I'm about to tell you. Every time you scroll past a video like this because it's too heavy or too dark, you're participating in that erasure. You're letting the cover-up continue. If you believe that the voices that powerful people tried to silence deserve to be heard, stay with me, because forgetting is how we let history repeat itself. Now, let me show you exactly what those 3 months of preparation really meant. The room they take her to is called the Gelin Odessa, the bride's chamber. The name is a lie. It isn't a chamber. It's a laboratory. Every detail has been calculated over generations. The walls are paneled in dark ebony, chosen specifically because it absorbs light, makes the space feel like it's closing in. The carpets are so thick that footsteps make no sound. The windows are covered not with curtains, but with heavy wooden shutters, nailed shut. The only light comes from oil lamps, positioned at specific angles. Modern psychologists who've studied the architectural plans say the lighting was designed to create disorientation. Bright enough to see, but positioned so you could never quite tell what time it was, how much time had passed. On the walls, tapestries, not decorative ones. Each one depicts a story from Islamic history of the ideal wife. Women who sacrificed everything. Women who obeyed without question. Women who found joy only in their husband's approval. Visual propaganda running on a loop 24 hours a day. Gulnar Hatun enters the room like a head mistress at an execution. 60 years old. A face that looks carved from Cappadocian stone. In her hands, a leather-bound book written in Ottoman script. This book has no title on the cover. Inside, detailed instructions for breaking a human being's autonomous will while keeping the body intact. It had been refined over 8 decades. Fatma was the 18th princess to go through this particular version. Stand, Gulnar commands. And for the next 4 hours, Fatma learns the 18 postures of humility. These aren't simple bows. Each one has specific angles, specific meanings, specific messages encoded in body language that had been systematized like mathematics. The greeting bow, 30 degrees neck tilt, hands below the heart, eyes down. Message, I am grateful for your attention. The serving bow, 45 degrees, hands extended, palms up. Message, I exist to fulfill your needs. The retiring bow. Full prostration, forehead to ground. Message, I disappear when you wish it. 4 hours a day, every day for 3 months. Modern kinesiologists who've studied the documented postures say they're designed to create what's called embodied submission. When your body's muscle memory overrides conscious resistance, your mind might want to stand tall, but your trained muscles betray you, pulling you into submission automatically. By week 3, Fatma's body bows before her mind can decide to. That was the point. They came for her voice next. 43 words. That's what Fatma's entire vocabulary was reduced to. Not 43 word types. 43 specific phrases written out on parchment that she was permitted to speak. Yes, my lord, as you wish. Forgive my inadequacy. Thank you for your mercy. I am honored by your attention. 43 ways to disappear while still making sound. Any deviation, any attempt to speak outside this list. The first time, forced fasting. 24 hours without food. The second time, the reflection cell, a space barely large enough to sit in, pitch black for 6 hours. The third time, public humiliation, brought before the entire female household, over 300 women, while senior concubines listed her failures, her inadequacies, her worthlessness as a royal daughter. By week 5, Fatma has stopped trying to speak anything else. The girl who once debated scholars can't form a complete sentence. Twice a week there's a ceremony called the Lesson in Perspective. Here's what that means. Fatma, daughter of the Sultan, granddaughter of the most powerful woman in the empire, is required to personally serve her father's favorite concubines. Not symbolically, actually serve them. She washes them, combs their hair, dresses them in the garments they'll wear for their intimate appointments with her father, feeds them by hand like a servant feeding nobility. One witness account from a junior attendant, who later left the palace, and wrote privately about what she saw. The princess shook so violently while fastening the ruby necklace on her Dija Sultan that the stones rattled like dice in a cup. She wept without sound. I have never seen a human being cry while making no noise. It was like watching a ghost try to mourn its own death. This wasn't random cruelty. This was systematic psychological warfare designed to accomplish one specific goal. Destroy the princess's sense of rank, worth, and identity. Make her understand in her bones that even enslaved women who share her father's bed have more value than she does. By week 8, Fatma's hands don't shake anymore when she dresses the concubines. Not because she'd accepted it, because part of her had stopped being present. Beneath the harem, in rooms that weren't on any official palace maps, they'd built replicas, exact replicas of bridal chambers. And in these rooms, mannequins, not simple ones. These had been commissioned from Venetian craftsmen who specialized in anatomical models for medical schools. They were detailed, disturbingly detailed. And Fatma, 15 years old, mind already fracturing from 3 months of systematic abuse, was brought to these rooms twice a week. Under the supervision of elderly women who took notes in Persian, she was required to rehearse, practice scenarios no child should know exist. Every reaction was documented. Subject displayed fear response. Session extended. Subject exhibited tears. Additional conditioning required. Subject showed physical resistance. Increased sessions ordered. They were building a manual, a technical guide, how to ensure the wedding night goes smoothly. One of these manuals was discovered in 2019 in the Topkapi archives. It's written like a medical textbook, clinical, detailed, horrifying in its bureaucratic precision. The psychologist who reviewed it said it reads like a CIA torture manual from the 1950s, except this one was written in 1623. 7 days before the wedding, Fatma is moved to an isolated pavilion in the palace gardens, the Galen Kushku. No one can enter or leave. No sound from outside can penetrate. Her diet becomes regulated by the ounce. Not for health, for mood control. Pomegranates, honey, almonds, goat's milk, and exotic spices from Yemen. Modern chemical analysis of similar historical recipes suggests these spices contained compounds we now recognize, mild sedatives, substances that induce dreamlike compliance, natural anxiolytics. She bathes twice daily in waters infused with valerian root, poppy extract, orange blossom. Not for cleanliness, for chemical sedation. The walls are covered in mirrors. Venetian glass expensive, positioned strategically. Everywhere Fatma looks, herself, watching herself, policing herself. It's a technique the Sufis called muraqaba, self-observation for spiritual growth. Here it became a weapon, making the victim her own guard. On the final night they give her a special tea. The recipe was recovered from palace medical records. It contained concentrated poppy milk, crushed manda root, and a third substance historians believe was an early dissociative compound. The goal wasn't sleep, but the goal was separation. Mind from body, present in flesh, absent in spirit. As she drinks it, sitting alone in that pavilion, surrounded by mirrors showing her infinite fractured reflections, Fatma's last coherent thought, recorded in a journal entry she wrote hours before, was this: "Tonight the stars will still move. Tomorrow they will still be there, but I won't be able to see them anymore. Not really. The girl who loved stars is about to become someone else, someone I don't know." Mother says, this is what it means to be a woman of power. If this is power, I would rather be a slave with a soul. Then the fog rolls in and the girl who loved stars stops existing. March 15, 1623. Istanbul is celebrating the entire city. Processions wind through streets perfumed with burning frankincense. Musicians from 3 continents compete to be heard over the roar of 100,000 people. In Topkapi's grand halls, mountains of food cover tables made from Lebanese cedar, whole roasted lambs, towers of fruit, pastries dripping with honey. Janissaries, the empire's elite soldiers, perform martial demonstrations, their swords flashing in choreographed combat that draws cheers like theater. Coins are thrown to crowds. Prisoners are released from jail in honor of the Union. The whole city is drunk on the glory of imperial power, and in a private chamber Fatma sits motionless. Court physicians are monitoring her. Their notes from that afternoon. Pulse weak, irregular, skin cold despite braces, eyes unfocused, tracking movement poorly. Subject appears conscious but unresponsive to direct questions. Sedative tea administered as per protocol. Proceeding to ceremony. She's awake but not present. When night falls, the public celebration ends. The private ceremony begins. The structure had been built during the reign of Mehmed the Conqueror, over 150 years earlier. 3 stories, octagonal, each floor designed for a specific phase of the ritual. Fatma is escorted by a procession of women carrying candles through darkened gardens. The only sound, fabric rustling. No one speaks. At the entrance, they pause. In that pause, maybe 5 seconds, one of the younger attendants would later swear she heard Fatma whisper something. Not in Ottoman Turkish, in Greek. A prayer to Artemis, the Virgin Goddess. A prayer from before Islam, before the Empire. A prayer so old it predates the palace itself. Lady of the Moon, if you can hear me, let me die before dawn. Then they enter. 3 hours in waters steaming with Damascus rose, jasmine, sandalwood, Somali amber. The ointments applied to her skin weren't just perfume. Modern forensic analysis of similar historical preparations shows they contained diluted opium derivatives, substances that cause what physicians today call dissociative euphoria, where the body continues to function, but the conscious mind retreats into a kind of waking dream state. The goal? A body that stops resisting even as the mind screams. One of the attendants recorded, "The princess did not struggle. She did not react. Her eyes were open, but she did not see us. It was like bathing a beautiful corpse. White silk embroidered with gold thread. Pearls from the Persian Gulf. A crown so heavy it forces her head down by sheer weight, but hidden within the beautiful costume. Internal cords that bind her torso, restricting deep breathing. Clasps designed to make the garment nearly impossible to remove without help. Weighted jewelry that acts as functional restraints. Shoes with thick, unbalanced soles that make running impossible. The wedding dress is a prison disguised as splendor. Meanwhile, in another chamber, Kara Mustafa Pasha is receiving his own instructions. Senior military advisors, veterans of a dozen campaigns, teaching him specific phrases designed to establish dominance, physical positioning techniques, methods of intimidation refined on battlefields. He's being prepared not for love, he's being prepared for conquest. The same tactics he'd used to break enemy commanders now applied to a 15-year-old girl. Zeth, that's what they called it. The Ascension. The room's walls are covered in tapestries depicting military victories, cities sacked, armies crushed, princesses captured in war. The message is explicit. What happens in war will happen here. The bed has been fitted with concealed rope systems for safety. Cushions soaked in sedative oils. Lighting controlled to create maximum psychological impact behind carved wooden screens. Witnesses, physicians, scribes, their job document that the marriage was consummated, make sure the machine worked, the doors close. What happened next was recorded in encrypted medical notes. It's written in Persian and sealed for over 600 years. I'm going to tell you what those notes say, not because it's entertainment, because erasing what happened to these girls is exactly what the Empire wanted. And we refuse to let that erasure stand. The physicians documented complete physical and psychological collapse within the first hour. Subject's body exhibited severe tremors. Voice disappeared entirely. No sound produced despite apparent attempts at speech. Eyes rolled back. Consciousness flickered between present and absent states. Primary male participant initially interpreted subject state as defiance. Employed recommended intimidation techniques. Subjects showed no responsive resistance, not due to compliance, but apparent psychological absence. After 3 hours of failed attempts at consummation, additional sedatives administered. Physical consummation achieved only after subject entered what we term shock mood, absolute shock. A state where the body continues to function while conscious awareness appears to have completely withdrawn. There's a term for this in modern psychology: dissociative shutdown. It's what the mind does when trauma becomes so overwhelming that consciousness itself becomes the enemy. The mind abandons the body to protect itself, even though that protection is an illusion. The final medical note written near dawn. Internal injuries documented. Repeated loss of consciousness. Subject's pulse dangerously weak. What we observed tonight was not a wedding night, it was what we term Ruhan Chikmasa. The departure of the soul. Consummation achieved. Marriage sealed. Physical body remains functional. The person who entered this chamber, however, did not survive the night. When dawn broke, Istanbul celebrated a successful royal wedding. Coins thrown to crowds, blessings recited in mosques, poetry written praising the union. And in that pavilion, Fatma sat in silence, staring at nothing. Her girl had died, not her body. That would linger for 29 more years. But everything that made her Fatma gone. I need you to pause for a second. What you just heard isn't fiction. It's not exaggeration. It's documented in medical journals, architectural records, witness testimonies. These girls existed. Their suffering was real. And for 600 years, that suffering was deliberately hidden. You know what matters right now? That you're still watching. That you haven't clicked away because it's uncomfortable. If you've made it this far, you understand something. History isn't supposed to make you comfortable. It's supposed to make you aware. Subscribe to Crimson Historians. Not for me. For every Fatma whose story almost got buried forever. That night was just the beginning. The years that followed would reveal a truth far more complex than anyone imagined. The morning after the wedding, the palace physicians were alarmed. Not because something went wrong, because it went too right. Fatma had developed what they clinically termed selective mutism. She didn't speak at all. When directly commanded by Gulnar Hutton, or her husband, she would respond in barely audible whispers using only those 43 permitted phrases. But voluntary speech gone. Her appetite vanished. She had to be force-fed like an infant. Attendants literally putting food in her mouth, massaging her throat to make her swallow. And then there were the episodes. Without warning, Fatma would begin weeping. Hours-long crying sessions where her whole body shook with sobs, but no sound came out. Attendants described it as watching someone drown in air. But worse than the crying, the fear. Any man, triggered what the physicians called fear sickness. A eunuch she'd known her entire life would enter the room. Immediate hyperventilation, extreme sweating, collapse. Her own father couldn't be in the same room with her. Guard shifts had to be rearranged. Male servants reassigned. Her entire life restructured around this overwhelming, body-destroying terror of male presence. The physicians tried everything. Herbal tinctures, music therapy, Sufi spiritual exercises, experimental treatments involving magnets and special diets. Nothing worked because you can't heal a broken mind by treating the body. The girl who once filled journals with astronomical observations. Those journals sat locked in a chest, never opened again. Her calligraphy instruments, tools she'd once used to create art that made poets jealous, gathered dust on a shelf. The gardens she'd loved exploring. She refused to enter them, every piece of who she'd been erased. Fatma's marriage to Kar Mustafa Pasha continued on paper. There were children, 4 of them, conceived during encounters that the medical records describe using the same clinical detachment as that first night. Subjects entered dissociative state. Consummation achieved. Subjects unresponsive for hours afterward. 4 children born to a mother who wasn't present for their conception. There were public appearances, state functions where Fatma stood silent and still as a porcelain doll, wearing whatever they dressed her in, moving when they positioned her. The illusion of normally for political necessity. But private records from palace staff tell a different story. Kara Mustafa Pasha began spending longer and longer periods away on military campaigns. He turned to opium, then to other women. Some accounts suggest he repeatedly requested assignments to the most dangerous frontiers: Hungary, Persia, Yemen. One letter written to a military colleague and discovered in Austrian archives reads, "They gave me a bride and told me it was a reward. What they gave me was a ghost wearing a crown. I cannot look at her without seeing what I was made to do. Send me to the frontier. Send me anywhere. Let me die in battle like a soldier, not in shame like a coward." He was haunted. She was destroyed, and the empire called it a successful marriage. Fatma lived 29 more years in this half-death, a ceremonial ornament, a womb for future political pawns. A lesson in what happens when you're born female in a system that values women only as currency. March 15, 1652, exactly 29 years after her wedding night, she died of what physicians recorded as brain fever. But the date was too precise to be coincidence. Palace staff whispered that she'd simply decided on that anniversary that she'd carried the weight of memory long enough. That after 29 years of living as a ghost, she finally gave herself permission to stop. Her death was marked with appropriate ceremony and then forgotten. Official Ottoman chronicles barely mention her. One line: Fatma Sultan, wife of Khan Mustafa Pasha, mother of 4 children, died in the year 1652. She was noted for her piety and obedience. The brilliant astronomer erased. The gifted calligrapher erased. The curious intellect erased, replaced with piety and obedience. That's what they wanted you to remember. That's what we're here to correct. Here's what haunts me about this story. It's not just that it happened, it's how perfectly it worked. The Ottoman court understood something that modern psychology only formally codified in the 20th century. The most effective control isn't physical restraint. It's psychological conditioning that makes the victim police themselves. That turns resistance into an impossibility their own mind won't allow. They built a machine, a system so efficient at breaking autonomous will that it ran for nearly 300 years, with only minor adjustments. At least 37 documented princesses went through variations of this process between 1530 and 1826. 37 brilliant, educated, powerful women, each one destroyed with the same clinical precision. And the machine didn't stop with the Ottoman Empire. Similar systems existed, less documented, less systematic, but functionally identical in other royal courts. Imperial China's foot-binding wasn't just about small feet. It was about immobility, control through physical limitation. European royal courts had their own bridal preparation rituals that historical records hint at, but never fully describe. Aristocratic families worldwide used marriage as a political tool with preparation that often meant breaking a daughter's will. The specifics differed. The goal was always the same: transform a person into an instrument. What disturbs me most isn't the past. It's how thoroughly this was hidden. The same system that destroyed these women also erased their suffering from history, replaced screams with ceremonies, trauma with triumph, victims with venerated wives. For 6 centuries, the official story unchallenged. It wasn't until 2019, that researchers finally pieced together what actually happened in those chambers. Think about that. How many other truths are still buried? How many voices are still silenced? How many times have you read a history book that described a royal wedding without questioning what that phrase actually meant for the bride? The story of Fatma Sultan is a reminder. History isn't just the tale of emperors and their conquests. It's also the echo of those who were silenced, the record of pain that powerful institutions tried to erase, the truth that survives despite every attempt to bury it. When we recover these stories, we do more than understand the past. We honor the humanity that was denied. We speak the names that were forgotten. We refuse to let suffering become invisible just because it was convenient for those in power. There's a quote attributed to Consummation Sultan herself, Fatma's mother, written in a private letter discovered in French archives. "I have ruled an empire from shadows. I have made sultans and unmade them. I have survived assassins and outlasted enemies. But I could not protect my daughter from the machine I helped build." That is the price of power. You feed the machine, and eventually it feeds on you. you've just witnessed one of history's darkest truths. A preparation ritual designed to create perfect obedience that became systematic psychological torture. A wedding night that should have been celebrated that became a source of lifelong trauma. A brilliant young woman who dreamed of studying stars and spent 29 years as a ghost of herself before dying on the exact anniversary of the night that killed her spirit. If this story reminds you how fragile humanity is,